welcome to the last session of day one. Make It Flame 2022 and beyond. I'd like to take this time to thank Levitt Machinery for all of their support of Actsafe and all of our initiatives over the past years, especially with conference and especially with this session. They are sponsoring our session today. If you don't know me by now, then you will never, ever know me. But if you don't know me, my name is Anand. I am the manager of motion picture programs and services here at Actsafe. I would like to once again acknowledge that while we are all gathered virtually across this vast land, I'd also like to recognize the importance of the traditional Indigenous territories that we all live and work on today. Once again, if you want to know more about the territory that you live and work on specifically, you can visit the Native Land digital website and search the territory on which you are located, native-land.ca. We have a fantastic panel to close things out today. Industry professionals, subject matter experts, all great people are here to share some important information about propane appliances on our work sites. And this panel is all going to be moderated by the fabulous Catherine Pavoni from Directive BC. A couple of little points before I turn it over to Catherine. If you have any questions that you would like to ask of Catherine and of the panel, use the Q&A function, and you will notice this Q&A function in the little chat window. There'll be chat, there will be participant and closed captioning buttons. Somewhere in there is Q&A. If you see a question that you also like that's in that Q&A, you can vote it up so Catherine will know to actually ask it. And I think that's it from me. So without further delay, hey, Catherine, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Make It Flame 2022 and beyond. I'll ask my panelists to all join me on the stage now. And thanks for everyone joining us out there. As you all know, joining us today, the film industry in BC is well known for being extremely collaborative and innovative when it comes to tackling challenges that arise. In a constantly changing world, we have proven that our industry is able to adapt and adopt new processes. When it comes to safety, we are always willing to go above and beyond to keep our cameras rolling. What we must do creatively behind the camera to get the image in front of the camera is unique and sometimes way outside the norm of what other industries do. When the script says car blows up while superhero flies over it, we get to work and make it happen. Our highly skilled special effects technicians regularly use gas equipment to deliver flame on camera. Unlike a permanent installation of a fully functional gas fireplace or a commercial barbecue, this equipment is used in a variety of locations and must be available pretty much any time, and the equipment must be flexible enough to meet the creative needs of the shot. For this reason, it is often like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole when it comes to compliance regarding the use of this regulated equipment. Therefore, when industry was approached by Technical Safety BC to discuss regulatory concerns, an industry-led working group was quickly formed to build out custom solutions to support compliance. This is what we will walk you through today. And I'd like to introduce you to the panelists who have been at the table with us since this work began. First up is Brian Zinn, who's a Senior Gas Safety Officer at Technical Safety BC. Brian, would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you, although it's virtually. It's a great opportunity to get this information out, and hope you get something worthwhile out of the session today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Phil Clapwick, Business Representative at AESC 891.
Thanks, Catherine. It's great to be here and be here with my younger brother, Brian. It's been pointed out that we're actually twins, but I'm happy to be here participating on this panel on something we've been carrying forward for several years now. Really enjoying the work and especially supporting the fantastic technicians we have in the Special Effects Department.
Thank you, Phil. And Rory Cutler, Special Effects Coordinator and owner of International Special Effects Group. Over to you, Rory.
Hi there. Pleasure to be here and speak to all this. As Brian and Phil have mentioned, it's taken a little while to get. It's a journey, and we've had a lot of success along it. So nice to share it now finally.
Good point, Rory. Lots of fun to be had on this file for sure. we can move on to the first slide there, Aidan, and I'll pass it over to Brian to speak a bit to Technical Safety BC.
Okay. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, so for those that may not be aware of who we are, Technical Safety BC is an independent, self-funded organization where we oversee the safe installation and operation of technical systems and equipment across the province. In addition to issuing permits, licenses, certificates of qualification, we work with industry to reduce safety risk through assessment, education, outreach, enforcement, and research. Primarily, our role in the province is under the requirements of the Safety Standards Act and associated regulations. Technical Safety BC's role is to provide safety oversight across several technologies in the province, and these include electrical equipment and systems, gas-fired equipment and systems, which we're primarily speaking to today, boilers, pressure vessels, and refrigeration systems, which we'll touch on a little bit are on the pressure vessel side around cannons today, and then elevating devices, elevators, escalators, aerial trams, ski lifts, amusement devices, and railways, including the SkyTrain. So we look at quite a wide variety of technical systems and provide the oversight in the province for those. And basically, we've been involved with the motion picture industry through our electrical technology, where we interacted with the television industry and through electrical work involving electrical equipment and systems. A similar collaboration took place some years ago, which I believe Phil is aware of, to help industry achieve compliance to the BC Electrical Safety Regulation and the adopted code. Next slide, please, Aidan. So there are the various types of special effects equipment we look at under the regulations is basically in two categories. So the special effects equipment is subject to requirements under the Safety Standards Act, the Gas Safety Regulation, and the Boiler Pressure Vessel Regulation. All defined gas equipment systems in BC must use certified components and be approved for their intended use. Typical special effects systems consist of a fuel supply, piping assemblies, flame bars, simulated fireplaces, or handheld torches. A defined pressure vessel, such as a propane cannon, must be specifically designed and constructed for the intended use in accordance with the Boiler and Pressure Vessel Regulation. These two types of various regulated equipment require design registration. So special effects gas equipment and the propane cannons are required to be registered in order to obtain approval for the complete system of the equipment and their intended use. Owners of industry designated small or medium gas flame effect model packages must submit a gas design registration application for each system type. Once registered, special effects models must be physically assessed by a gas safety officer and deemed compliant to the registered design and the applicable codes. Special effects pressure vessels or cannons operating above 15 pounds pressure must be constructed by either an AESC certificate of authorization holder or a BC designated and licensed MA shop. Cannons must be designed, purpose-built pressure vessels and registered in accordance with the provincial regulatory requirements for the registration of pressure vessels. Both of these technologies and the equipment under them require operating permits, and they're required for the owners of registered small and medium gas flame effect models and propane pressure vessel cannons. The owners of the flame effect models are to apply for a special type operating permit. Issuance of the operating permit allows for the use of the listed gas equipment and associated regulated work to be undertaken by persons authorized under the Safety Standards Act and relevant regulations. Additionally, owners of propane cannons that have been registered and successfully assessed by a boiler pressure vessel safety officer are required to obtain a pressure vessel operating permit prior to use of this type of equipment. In order to authorize the performance of gas regulated work, special effects industry individuals must be certified as a minimum in accordance with one or both industry developed programs. These levels are dependent on the desired scope of work that you wish to perform. Level 1 primarily applies to the certification for use of propane cannons. The certification covers propane handling, purging, and transfer related to the safe operation of a propane charged cannon. A course is being developed by industry and recognized by Technical Safety BC to address this need. The second level applies to certification for use of regulated gas equipment and systems, the small and medium packages we referred to earlier. In order to assemble, use, and operate registered gas models, successful completion of a recognized training program specifically developed for special effects technicians is required. Upon completion of this course, a special purpose certificate of qualification as detailed under the gas safety regulation must be applied for. This is not required for individuals that already currently hold a valid Class A or B gas fitter certificate of qualification. So thank you, Catherine. Back to you.
Thank you, Brian. I think we can move to the next slide here, Aidan, and we just want to quickly show you what we're talking about. Obviously, we're a visual industry, so these are the two buckets, and I'd like Rory to speak to how they get used on set.
Essentially, flame is one of the components that we've had in film since the very early days. Creating it has always been a challenge, and at different times in different places, we have to create it in a manner that conforms with both the design needs of the shot, the script, and makes it the most safe product we can use. Over the years, the industry's moved heavily to propane because of the fact that it's essentially one of the more safe, containable, manageable gases of a flammable nature that we can use. It avoids the stickiness of liquid fuels, the dirtiness of carbon fuels and waxes and so on, and it's easily controllable. From the point of view of doing special effects, it's an immediate on-off type situation, and it's very repeatable. We can come up with an effect that will do what we want, turn it on and off as we want, and doesn't leave any sort of after effect we have to deal with other than the heat that's generated. These two little video examples show you a flame application, which we can roll now. Just the use of the ability to create or design a shape or an image from flame. Propane, because it's as handleable and easily controllable as it is, allows us to essentially create shapes or meet design needs that might be more difficult in something that is liquid or only burns in a wicked environment or a situation where it has to be in a trough or a tray. Propane can be essentially designed almost as if you were sketching a map with it. You can create a burner that allows you to create a shape or whatever. So it gives you a great deal of flexibility. The repeatability also allows us to simulate explosions in a lot of cases. The use of has been one of the standards for doing explosion simulations for a number of years now. The ability to essentially control and regulate exactly how much explosion we have, dial it in, if you will, is what makes it desirable. We can set a pressure, test a pressure, be sure that we're happy with it, and then repeat it time and time again, and be able to work in and around stunt people or in contained environments by using it. So these are two of our applications that make it particularly and uniquely useful for what we do. The concept of coming up with flame is something that, because no matter what you do, it's a real element. It's not like dealing with something that's created in a computer or has no physical reality to it. There is heat, there is fire danger from it. So no matter what you do when you're working with flame, you have to have as much control over the elements that you're using as possible. When we design something for film and television, we're always having to look first at what the needs of the script are. It might be something simple, backgroundy, things like torches, maybe campfires. A lot of times we do scenes where maybe it's a Western and you're going to have a half a dozen campfires in the background. That's something where you just want to have something controllable. It's creating a light source. It's essentially a piece of the set, but you also want to be able to ensure that what you do there is as safe as possible. So by having a propane system, we're not generating a lot of heat. We don't have a real fire going there that would require more fire maintenance or could spread by the way of sparks and so on. It just helps paint the picture of what we're trying to create visually. So we will look at those issues and determine what things in a script are going to require that application, and then what the best way to do it is. They may be, as they say, backgroundy pieces that are small. It can also develop into things where the specifics of the script actually require an actual fire to be the centerpiece of the show. For example, all of these fire-based TV series that we have these days, Chicago Fire and whatnot, things like that, that take us into the environment of the flames, and they're a big part of the character of the script. In those cases, we're dealing with the issue of a lot of proximity to stunt performers, sometimes real performers. And again, in all of these issues, we're trying to design a safe, manageable way to put what appears to be something very dangerous into an environment where people are working and have to maintain crew safety and safety of performers. So the controllability of this material is the reason we use it. In designing those sorts of things, we have to look at the script. We have to look at what the director has asked for from the performance of the fire, as well as the actors and the cast. We have to look at the issues the production designer will add to that in terms of where we want this to happen, what type of building it needs to be, where it needs to occur, what it looks like, and the location issues that incur when we start talking about where we're actually going to go and shoot this. Sometimes we're in a very controlled environment, a back lot or a studio, where we have the most control over the set, the pieces, and the location we're in. Other times we're in a real location where we're working, within the constraints of the real world and the physicality. And each of these things has to be taken into effect when we design and come up with how we're going to create the effect in the end. The final thing that comes up in doing these things is actually performing the shoot. In the use of these fire effects, we have to ensure that we've tested them, that we're happy with their performance, that they're doing what we expect, and that when that all happens and we bring the cast and crew in, it'll do exactly the same thing, so that we can be sure that we're getting the performance we want, they're getting the shots they need, and we're getting the safety over the whole process that we need. TV and features are the primary areas we work in for this sort of thing. There is some live aspect of fire use, but it's not something that we're particularly covering in this element, because this kind of covers what we were tasked with dealing with, which was film and television production. The nature of features in TV they're a bit different in their design and timelines. With features, we tend to have a single script, a fair bit of prep, meaning in often cases a month, 2 months, 3 months, and then we're producing one episode, if you will, one shooting schedule. So the ability to plan things out gives us a lot more time on features than it does with television, where we're working on 7 or 8 day schedules. Often we don't get a script until 7 days before we actually start it. So we're working on a fairly short rotation. And so we have to deal with the differences in those elements and how they work in terms of how we design things and how we utilize them. In a feature environment, we have a lot of time to plan things, design things, test things, and build things custom that might be elements of these flame systems that we've come up with, put together into different layers. And in many cases with the biggest jobs, which we aren't really talking about here today, the class 3 work that we've designated, which are large fire effects, we bring in gas fitters, gas suppliers, and the heavier equipment that's needed to do the large scale stuff that we might do for mostly fire-based shows. In TV, it's usually a quicker timeline where we're trying to do, most of the times it's small things, usually sort of supplemental things to the background of a shot, more of the sort of things that Catherine had mentioned earlier with fireplaces, campfires. A lot of times it's burning barrels, which are just decorative pieces that go in the background of environment where we're trying to make it look cold and make people huddle around a campfire or something like that. Those are all just little equipment pieces that give us the opportunity to create these little flame sources. They're the sort of things that come up most of the time in television. So they're not things that require necessarily the same degree of design and plan, but they do require the same nature of being safe in what we do. So we have to come up with the process of doing that. This whole plan that we're presenting today, or this whole program we've developed, is essentially a way of bringing work we've been doing for years into a compliance level that we haven't had before. prior to now, the techniques and design systems that or design technology we've used to create all these effects has always existed, but there's been a disparity because we haven't been working within the system. The concept of this was to get it together to where we and the way we do things was brought into a compliance with the technical BC and the way that we should be doing things, and making sure that everybody is doing it in a similar manner, so that we maintain a level of sort of certification, training, and knowledge really across the board throughout the industry. I think that kind of covers up that area, and I'll throw it back to Catherine so we can move ahead.
Thank you, Rory. That's awesome. So obviously quite a few challenges for most this. Phil, do you want to speak to how we came into compliance?
Yeah, I mean, it's you can go to the next slide. So this is a really interesting thing. Obviously, Brian's talked about the fact that we have very rigid regulations that are built to protect not only workers, but the general public generally, most of the time in permanent installations. And you know, it's province-wide. Everybody's held to the same standards, and they're very, they're not, you can't just bend them. And then we have what Rory described, which is an industry that's built on a modular, temporary nature, where we have to deal with what you couldn't anticipate tomorrow, yesterday. And you know, that's the kind of work that we do. And the pathway to compliance here, and working within the bubble, where we can say, okay, the regulations are this. How do we actually bring all of the work that we're doing into some sort of compliance with the regulations? Started out as a conversation which developed into 3 areas particularly, because we know that we have regulated equipment that has either been modified sometimes or is combined off the shelf. So the first part of all of that was seeking and applying for special design registration for those that equipment. There are special design registrations. There's a process for going through that. And we've rewritten that with Technical Safety BC to actually make it a little easier for our members to get through that process. And we've demoed it several times back and forth. And so we basically have that system all built already. Then there's a process of actually applying for the operating permits for it. When we have these design registrations for the equipment actually approved, you actually have to have an application to have people be able to operate that equipment. And that requires the third portion of it, which is creating coursework to actually ensure that the people who are operating it have a degree of technical ability and certification, qualification in that area. And so to that end, as Rory mentioned, we did actually engage with a course designer, a company called Teamworks, who specializes in writing technical courses. And on behalf of all of the special effects technicians in BC, we took this on, worked with them to create 2 levels of courses, one for basic operators who are doing transfer and purging, and then the second level of course, which is a more in-depth course, which will certify them with a SPCQ, a special process certificate of qualification, right?
Special purpose qualification
Purpose, not
certificate.
process.
Yes.
After all this, how did I get that wrong on the anyways? So that's what that one is, the SPCQ. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a later slide, but it's basically those 3 areas: registration, application for operating permits, and then certification. So thank you,
Thanks, Phil.
Catherine.
It's a mouthful, so no one's holding you hostage for not getting it. So next slide. Just want to quickly touch base. So the process is fairly similar for the pressure vessels, aka the propane cannons, which you saw in that video, and the gas equipment packages. First thing to note, which is very important, if a pressure vessel has been modified in any capacity and it is not ASME approved, it has to be retired from use. The special effects companies must now register their non-modified equipment. Then they apply for their operating permits. And then anyone using the propane cannons must be level 1 certified. Next slide for me, please, Aiden. Aiden, do you mind switching slides for me quickly? and then the gas equipment, aka flame bars. So that process is the same, registering it first, then applying for the operating permits. And the key here is once the course has been released, the special purpose qualification certificate course, the coordinators will connect that SPCQ number to these packages going forward. And I'll pass it over to Rory to explain what I mean by small and medium equipment packages. Next slide for us, please.
Thank you. Yeah, if we look at the next slide. In an effort to try and come up with a way of categorizing this a bit at the beginning of the whole process, we broke the kind of work we do down into 3 essential sizes. We came up with a small package, which is essentially the smallest version of what we do and probably the most common. It's something where we're creating a single flame source. It's usually the sort of burn barrels, campfires, fireplaces that I mentioned earlier. And there's situations where the system is very simple. It's got a very simple basic set of requirements. There's a bit of flexibility for how it's developed and worked. The basic goal here is to come up with a system where by creating the system and certifying and submitting the system for approval, we have an element or a tool in our toolkit that we can bring out when we need. That is essentially a little list of the type of items that go into it that's sitting on your screen there. But in a nutshell, it's a way of taking a bottle of gas and in a safe and controlled manner, allowing it to get out to a burner element in a simple and adaptable manner. This is, as I say, the smallest version we came up with, and it's the most commonly used. The next level, which is a medium package, if you want to jump to the next slide there, it begins to cover some of the stuff we do when we get into more involved things, primarily stuff that would be related to medium-sized burn sets or smaller, say a television-sized burn type situation. This is not so much used for something like a campfire or a torch type element. This is used when we're doing something where we might have a room that's going to be appearing to be on fire, and we have a couple of firemen, saving somebody. We're going to have several burner elements out there. We need to control them all in a way that gives us central control of them so that we can control the whole aspect of the room and safely turn it on and off as needed, but also adjust sort of the levels and so on of the flames. In a lot of cases, when we're doing flame for film, we're trying to essentially paint a picture, and we're also trying to light that picture to some extent. So the level and volume of these flames creates the image that we're trying to create, but also allow the light in the room and all the aspects that help create that look. So the control of each of these burners and the ability to adjust them a bit helps paint that picture. This sort of system is used where we might have a few sources of fuel, meaning a manifolded group of cylinders, controlled through a single manifold, allowing us to adjust the outputs of each of those burners, but also allowing us to turn the whole room off if the need occurs that we want to either cut because we're done the shot, or there's something that's starting to get too warm and we want to cool it down. Again, all of this is based on the concept of creating the already existing industry standard of safely using fire, but in a way that we're trying to bring ourselves into the compliance levels. The big issue in compliance in all of this has mostly been trying to find a way to make sure that all of the pieces that we use, which have traditionally been of a certified and approved nature, are now properly put together and tagged as systems so that we can now look at them and employ them in the uses we need in a safe and manageable way. Again, we do have a large system, which we're not addressing here, which is when we get into big burns, which we might be doing pumped liquid, things like that, where we're bringing in ticketed gas fitters, and it's a much more involved process. If you want to go to the next slide there, Aidan. In the assembly of these systems, we have to look at the issues that come up. The design of the system itself, bottle, valving, regulators, hoses, a thermal disconnect so that the burner element doesn't melt the hose it's supplying. These are all the issues that come up in the design of it. And some of these things are pretty common. The elements of them are all the same. How we employ them, that's how it gets designed into a given shot. That's a little more flexible. It has to be considered in the use permits and what we're dealing with. All the pieces that go into it, as I say, they're all, everybody's been using and continues to use certified and appropriate materials to do these things, but we need to put them together in a manner that gives us the ability to submit the system and get it approved. So that involves listing the items that are being used, putting together the drawings of how they're being used, and creating our package so that we can then look at the process of getting it approved and allowing us to continue to operate them in a safe manner, which also includes the use permits that come into place. Burners, of course, are somewhat different from show to show, different types. We've had a couple of pictures that came up. One of them was a flexible, what we call a BX or flexible burner element. That was the one that was seen in the small gas equipment package. It's a little bit of a flexible burner that allows you to wrap it around things. Others are steel pipe with slots cut in it. There are various materials and design systems that we can use and employ. They just have to fit the allowable materials and so on, so that we don't get into things that might cause other problems, like something that has plastic elements in there or something. When we build these systems, we need to ensure that whatever we do to service them and maintain them, if there's things that have to be that fatigue or are damaged in operation or handling, even in transport, they need to be replaced with the same materials. So if you have a valve that is a certified valve for propane, it needs to be the certified valve. If it gets damaged in transport and we need to replace it, you need to make sure that you use the same or better materials in replacing those parts. These are all things that seem pretty common sense to most people, but at the same time, doing it right means, and having a process means, we further ensure that we're not going to do it wrong at some point and create, a situation where a piece of equipment isn't up to doing the job it's being asked of it. As I say, most of these things are pretty straightforward to most of the people in the effects industry because none of it's new, but we're now trying to get to a point where we have got a better standard and a better level of compliance across the board that will make sure that all of these things are maintained and operated in a safer and better environment. I think in the end of it all is just talking a bit about the fuel itself. The management handling of propane is similar to any flammable material, and we have to deal with it according to transport and WMIS standards for how we handle it, how we store it. And these items are, again, it's not something new to anybody, but we try to make sure that these fuels are kept in a safe environment when they're not being used, that they're not stored in an indoor environment, that they're taken out into locked enclosures and safe locations for storage in between jobs, that they're only brought into interior environments and so on for the specific needs of that shot and then removed so that they're not left as a hazard. These are all things, again, that are pretty standard and have been around for years, but by putting them in a system that allows us to understand it better and bring every training that will get everybody to the same standard, we'll find ourselves in a safer workplace overall. I think that kind of covers that slide, so I'll hand it back to Catherine.
Thank you, Rory. Appreciate that. I'll actually just pass it back right away to speak about the training that we undertook, the training build out that we undertook.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the interesting parts, because when we start getting into the real technical nuts and bolts of it, I absolutely get lost in these courses because there's so much dialogue here that I have no understanding of. But basically, we created two courses. One that's roughly about a 4-hour course, which talks about safely purging, transferring, and storing of propane gas. And there's a physical component of it where the people have to actually perform these tasks in front of an instructor. We've run, I think, 8 cohorts through there, Catherine. I can't remember exactly, which is a substantial amount. And we're planning on running them bi-monthly for the rest of the year to try and capture all of the special effects technicians that we have. And currently at 891, I think we have a total of 600 people in the department. So we hope to get the vast majority of them in the next couple of years through the purging, transfer, and storage course. And that's just level 1. The second course is more in depth and goes into a lot more of the technical requirements, the code requirements, the regulations, and how to actually safely put together all of the different materials that Rory was talking about, and the assembly of all the different packages. That course itself is 24 hours, but it also includes the purging, transfer, and storage course. So if you've taken that, I think that works out to a 20-hour course at this point. we were teed up to actually roll that course out in a pilot program in January when all of a sudden Omicron took over. And so we had to step back from it. And currently we are working with a local studio to see if we can use a stage space an open stage space where we can pilot the course with a group of special effects coordinators and first assistants that were signed up for the January course over a weekend, hopefully, to enable them to take on the SPCQ so they can apply for the design registrations and the operating permits and that sort of thing. But that hopefully end of March, we should have that course, the first course, and then we'll take from there the learnings and revise and roll it out and on a scheduled basis monthly, probably. Back to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Phil. So before we get a bit more of a discussion here, I just want to make any questions. I'm not seeing any in the chat, so I'm assuming no. I just have a couple follow-up questions that I wanted to bring up here. The first one for you, Brian. Could you speak to some of the processes that were updated at Technical Safety BC? Like we discussed how, the application process sort of needs there for those applying. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure, you bet. Thanks, Catherine. I'd be happy to do that. So yeah, there's some of the things we worked on to utilize the processes for this industry group was development of a specific guidance document for industry to help submit gas design registration applications. So we have an engineering portal that's used primarily by Class A fitters and engineers and so forth. So we kind of developed a bit of a guidance document on how to get set up an account and everything else, just make it a little more user friendly than just what's on our website. So we kind of laid that out with the support of the working group. We created a specialized design registration submission requirement checklist. Again, kind of going back to what Rory spoke to on the packages and what's included in them and the material requirements. And it was all done with work and definitions brought forward by the working group and the coordinators that were involved with that process. And then also we created a design registration letter that specifically aligns to all the requirements for the smaller medium gas flame effect models, primarily because they don't fit the mold of what we normally would approve an appliance under, so to speak. So we designed a specific letter that suits that industry, and it clarifies the next steps, so to speak. Once the owner of a smaller medium packages gets the registration letter, they kind of know what the next steps are and what's coming. And we also worked on internal training as well. So again, because these processes were new to not just the special effects industry, but we developed some new internal processes as well to expedite, approvals, assessments, all that type of stuff. So we developed a specialized training program for safety officers, so they know once these designs get registered, what the next steps are and how it's going to work under the operating permits and going forward, and what to look for when they go out to site to initially look at these. And then once they're signed off on, those will get registered under the operating permit, which we spoke to earlier. And then basically, unless there's updates and so forth, there's no interaction on a day-to-day basis anymore. That's one of the beauties of going forward with this system is we won't need to ask for that kind of oversight going forward. And then finally, one of the regulatory tools we developed is a draft directive that pretty much clarifies and discusses all the processes we've outlined today that Catherine, Phil, and Rory spoke to. We've put that in an official document, and that's in draft form right now. It's still going through different departments and so forth, but we've collaborated with industry on that. And then once we've kind of got the pilot and everything's working the way it's intended to work, we will look at issuing that directive. So So thanks, Catherine.
Amazing, Brian. And we literally could not have done this without you. So huge thanks for all your work on that. I wanted.
Likewise.
You're gonna be sick of us. We're almost there. We're almost there. I think you would probably be best to actually address this question in the chat from Shane. He says site-specific assessments were listed as being part of the gas permit application. Does this mean a new permit is required for every new location?
Not to the models we talked to. So that's the idea going forward. Once you've got your defined, and we got the definitions from the working group, which I think they did a great job kind of trying to put all this into some kind of capturing title of these different uses of equipment or multi-uses of equipment. So once you have a smaller medium package registered, it's been assessed by a safety officer, we've issued the approval letter, that will get attached under your operating permit once you've been issued that. And you're allowed to use that system day in, day out without getting an installation permit specifically. Now, where the installation permit will come into play in the future is the large systems that Rory spoke to. So the one-of, so to speak, or the real complex or more intricated type of effects that are outside a definition, where small and medium, that's when you will need to get a specific site installation permit, a specific design registration for those larger ones. But the idea going forward for day-to-day applications is, and as Rory spoke to, that the regular or standard effects, you won't need that interaction day to day from us once this gets all put into solidification, so to speak. So
Perfect.
Does that help? So
you got a thumbs up, so I think you answered the question well.
Yeah, thank you.
Phil, I wonder if you maybe want to, Brian alluded earlier to a situation that was gone through earlier with the electricians, and they went through a similar process. Do you want to speak to sort of the process that?
Yeah, it's a very similar, and my background is lighting. For those that know me, I come from a theater background originally, and then stumbled into film, and I got my FE certification really early on, my FEFSR. So I'm very familiar with the process at Technical Safety BC of maintaining that and the work that was done. But that course and the certification didn't exist when I entered the industry. So it was created in a very similar fashion to respond to the fact that we were the Wild West in a lot of ways, and running sort of not necessarily afoul. We were fairly safe, but we were doing things the way that we thought we needed to do it to accomplish things in a mobile and temporary manner. And I remember back in the day, wiring up my own fixtures and making lights out of nothing at all, and because they were needed, you needed to do a specific gag or something that nobody had ever thought of making before. So we had a lot of burns from exposed bulbs and things like that, and risky situations. But of course, working closely with Technical Safety BC, which was not the name at the time, and they've been through 3 name changes, so I don't really know. But the same sort of concept went. They considered and worked with stakeholders in the industry to create courses and certification requirements based on experience plus code knowledge and that sort of thing. And it's resulted in, for the lighting electrics department at 891, we have roughly 1 out of every 3 members has a certification in that department. So we're operating at a ratio that's approved. It's basically 1 person with a ticket supervising 2 is the ratio you're supposed to be working with. So, that process happened years and years ago, but it's now ensconced and we're used to it. It allows the industry to move forward in a safe method. We're able to pull temporary electrical permits for locations in a method that's specific to the film and television industry. And it keeps us mobile and keeps us working in a very safe manner. So I hope that answered it.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. And you touched on the fact that obviously when a new process comes out, there may be a few little speed bumps along the way, and obviously we've been working really hard to try to simplify as much as possible. But I should note that we are going to continue working with the special effects technicians directly as much as we can to sort of help the process along. And I think we talked about doing an info session specific to the gas appliance application process, which is a little complicated, but basically once we get through this piece, it's a one-stop shop, and then Brian doesn't have to see us all the time, and we'll all be in compliance.
Yeah, and I should actually comment on that a little bit too, because there's a related thing to this. We've been working with the special effects coordinators and being the go-between Creative BC 891 and Technical Safety BC, but we're developing all of this work for all special effects technicians in the motion picture industry. I represent 600, as I said, 600 active special effects technicians, but that's not all the special effects technicians that work in this area. So we hope that those that are outside of our organization will be taking the coursework and bringing their stuff into compliance, because it's the standard, and the directive doesn't differentiate between union membership. It just talks about technicians.
Yeah, thanks, Val. I just wanted to circle back to what we were talking about with the special purpose qualification certificate and the back and forth we went through to sort of build out that syllabus and what needed to be included in it. And Rory, throughout that process, it was kind of that fine balance. We don't want to overteach or over certify. Do you want to sort of speak to the process of how what kind of material needed to be included in the certificate?
Yeah, we spent quite a bit of time trying to do two things. One, define what the packages were, because that kind of defined the materials we work with and gave us all a physical starting point. And then the second thing that we did was essentially try to look at what skills we need for that, and not overstate or overeducate that skill set. We wanted to try and find a point that gave the people in effects the knowledge they needed to do the job they're doing, but also didn't get into a bunch of information that won't apply to the work we do, essentially because we're not trying to train gas fitters here. We're trying to train specific talents to people who are doing a specific job in a way to make that a safe and useful environment. So in a lot of back and forth and discussion with Brian and the gang, we came up with the specific trade skills that are required to do the work we do, and try not to, turn this into a course that would become almost insurmountable from the point of view of effects people trying to get the knowledge they need and fill in the gaps they might have in a way that we can fit it into a working group of people. Because, as we all know, we're all working 12 hours a day, often more than 5 days a week. And as a result, trying to fit training in is a little tougher, particularly when you're dealing with a group of people who are already employed, essentially. If you're dealing with people who are starting out, going through apprenticeship programs, it's all geared around the process of getting them from A to B and getting the knowledge in them. With people that are already in a trade, and specifically because the trade isn't all about gas fitting. We have, probably 30 trades we touch on at various times in the special effects end of the industry. So we need to find a way to, not have it take over the entire aspect of what we do, and also not burden people that are regulating us with a bunch of things that they need to look at that don't affect or aren't affected by what we do. And that was a big part of it, trying to find that balance.
For sure. And I wonder, through the process, Brian, can you break it down for us what a special purpose qualification is and sort of why it was the best fit for our industry?
Yeah, sure. You bet, Catherine. So based on the excellent description Rory just gave of trying to figure out where the scope of work actually lied and what needed to be included, we only have certain flexibility under the regulation. So under the gas safety regulation, one of the certificates that's allowable is a special purpose. So basically, it entitles the holder to perform only the regulated work specified by the certificate and only under the conditions specifically endorsed on the certificate. So in other words, other than being a Class A or B gas fitter, kind of what Rory hinted on, outside of those two qualifications, there isn't really anything else that fits the specialized narrow scope of work being performed by the industry sector today. So the special purpose certificate of qualification was the best feasible option available under the regulation to certify individuals wanting to do the assembly, use, and operate of gas flame effect equipment. It was really the only way we could accommodate what's required to bring the industry into compliance, but also, again, to Rory's point, not overburden the industry or train them on something that's so far out of what they do, it just wouldn't make sense. So that's basically how we landed on that.
Yeah, for sure. And it basically means that just because they've gone through the level 2 course doesn't mean I can invite them over and make them build me a barbecue or install a gas fireplace. The special
Correct.
purpose is for performing special effects on set,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So when we issue it, it'll get issued with those terms and conditions we talked about. It'll be listed on there and based on the scope of work that's in the training program.
Okay, for sure. And we're getting pretty close to the end here, but I just wanted to ask Phil if you could give your sort of opinion on like what this work actually means for us as an industry in terms of having this certification and processes in place.
Well, I think it's elevating our game. I don't know that this kind of process has been undertaken in any other jurisdiction. A lot of this work happens under the direction of fire chiefs in the states and in involvement with them. But we're innovative and really ahead of the curve here in BC. And I think that this having certified technicians in multiple fields in our trade is always going to make us more attractive for a location to film. And education and training and safe equipment. There's no reason not to do that. I think it's a real benefit to the industry, and it will be one of the calling cards we can actually use.
I agree, and I appreciate that insight on it. Last question here, Rory. Just wanted to see if there's anything else sort of after going through this special effects technicians should know going forward in 2022.
I think just, like all things when we go through regulatory changes or nudges, I think there's a certain resistance and or fear of what that entails amongst the rank and file. And I think the main thing for everybody to understand is that's not an issue here. We've worked very closely with Brian and his people to come up with something that's going to work for everybody across the board. I know that it's a natural thing to think it's something new and complicated, but it really isn't. And we're going to be holding some symposiums to make it help people guide their way through it and get them educated. It's a good thing. It brings about a better level of safety and a better level of training. And really, to me, that's the point of all of these things. And it's not to be feared. And please move forward with it.
Fantastic. Any other thoughts, Phil, Brian?
Yeah, I personally want to thank all of the members of the working group that have contributed along the way. And we've worked with all the major special effects coordinators in BC, and their contributions to this program over the last couple, how long has it been, Brian, since we started down this path? But it's
been a while.
It's been invaluable with some of the busiest people in our industry that are racing from job to job, and to get their time on this and their insight to build the program, I think it's just been invaluable. So.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah. Anything from you, Brian?
Yeah, I echo pretty much everything Phil spoke to. This has been I've been with the organization in the regulatory business for going on 24 years now. And this is one of the most intricate, interesting projects I've worked on to date. So it's it's been a while, but COVID in there, and that kind of held everyone back as well, unfortunately. But it's been a very interesting pathway for me to go down, and I've enjoyed a lot of it. I've learned a lot from the working group and fellows like Rory and James and Cam, and it's been a pleasure learning what this industry does and how they do it, and I'm happy to be where we're at. It was a lot of things to figure out, like you said earlier, Catherine, trying to put a round peg in a square hole, but we figured out a way, and I'm very pleased with how it all worked out, and couldn't have done it without the great work the working group did, and the interaction between all parties, Phil, yourself, and all the coordinators, and it was a good experience, and I'm happy we're near the end.
For sure. And I guess I'd echo what all of you said, and thanking those that were involved from the beginning, getting it to this point. And I definitely know more about gas equipment than I ever wanted to. So hopefully when this is wrapped up, and if I need a second career, I'll come and knock on Rory's door and I come out and work with him.
That's a really good point, Catherine. I don't think anybody's commended you enough for Creative BC for allowing you to work on this project and
Yes.
Keep it all together, because you honestly kept us in the communication loop all the time. And Crystal, who's not here, Crystal Bronworth, assistant business rep's been instrumental in moving it forward every day. So
for sure. Well, thank you, and I'll pass it back over to Anand to wrap us up.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And yes, I want to thank Brian, Phil, Rory for being here on a sunny Friday afternoon and enlightening us, and definitely Catherine for putting this whole thing together. And not only did she guide the process of this particular subject through, she put this whole session together all by her lonesome. So thank you very much, Catherine, for doing that. It was a fantastic session. We're not done that yet, though. We've got a couple of other things. Up next is bingo. So 15 minutes. Hey, bingo is up. We do have some fantastic prizes. What are we giving away? A Samsung tablet. We've got AirPods on the prize list. A brand new Apple Watch. Ooh, Apple Watch. Nice. And a 65. I was going to say 65. It says 65 foot here, but I think it's actually 65-inch Samsung Smart TV. 65-foot TV, guys. Holy cow. You get the screen at BC Place. So if you want to hang around, you should have received an email with bingo cards or an access to bingo cards things. Please join us 15 minutes away. For those of you that are not joining us, tomorrow we continue the conversation 9 o'clock in the morning with a conference-wide discussion on the tragedy that occurred at the Rust film shoot down in New Mexico, specifically about whether or not that could happen in British Columbia or in Canada for that reason. So we've assembled a great panel. Dean Goodine, Tom Felcan, Brian Knight, and myself will be guiding the discussion about that. And I'll be honest, we've met twice this week already, and each time we just went, and the conversation was awesome both times, and it lasted 90 minutes each time. So tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, please join us for that. There's a whole bunch of other things on the schedule tomorrow. Another great session for the performing arts folks at 11 a.m. Musician rises above workplace injury. Of actually a local fellow in Port Coquitlam here, Jack Thomas, lost his arm in a workplace incident, and he was a drummer, an aspiring musician, and he continues to be a drummer and an aspiring musician. So a really nice motivational talk there. A whole bunch of other things for locations, people, joint health and safety. Visit us tomorrow, 9 o'clock in the morning. Aiden, is there anything else you want to add? before we bid adieu for the day?
Good. I was trying to add a share screen, but we're having some technical challenges over here in my office, and I apologize to Catherine as well. When she was asking for a couple of slides, we flew through like 20 of them. But no, I think the other thing we need to do is just thank our break sponsor. Who's that? My apologies.
Do we have a break sponsor? Is there a break
No,
sponsor?
there is no break now, I guess. Yeah, breaks are over.
Yeah, no, we're done.
We're taking 50. You're right. Let's go for Zoom. Everybody for bingo.
Okay, but we should thank Levitt again for sponsoring this particular one. With that, thank you all so much.